Hideki Tojo was born on December 30, 1884 in Tokyo, Japan. He died December 23, 1948, also in Tokyo, Japan. A Japanese general and statesman, Hideki Tojo was the most powerful leader in the Japanese government during World War II. He authorized the attack on Pearl Harbor and pushed the Japanese offensive in China, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. In 1945, Tojo was arrested by the Allies as a war criminal, tried, convicted, and executed in 1948.
Japan's unprovoked invasion of China began in 1931 with the attack on Manchuria. For the next 10 years, Japanese aggression spread across the Pacific unchecked. A group of military leaders had overthrown civil authority in Japan, gaining total control over the country. Heading this group was General Hideki Tojo, known as the Razor, and a descendant of a minor samurai family. Here he is seen with the Emperor Hirohito and his cabinet. In 1936, Tojo led Japan into the Axis coalition with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. The scene was set for global war. Japan's official entry into World War II began with an all-out offensive in the Pacific. On Sunday, December 7, 1941, Japan's Imperial Air Force approached its target. Below, unaware, lay Pearl Harbor. Taking off from aircraft carriers which had slipped unseen into bombing range of the Hawaiian Islands, Japanese pilots dropped their deadly loads of bombs. 2 years later, in 1943, an outraged America was pushing the enemy back, island by island, blasting to pieces Tojo's plan for conquest. In 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing Japan to finally surrender. Soon after, Tojo attempted suicide, but failed. He recovered to face an international tribunal which convened in occupied Tokyo. Hideki Tojo had returned to his destroyed nation's capital, stripped of glory, despised as the designer of a senseless war which had brought an industrious and prosperous people to ruin. Tojo sat unemotionally through 2 years of hearings. He was allowed to tell his side of the story in a 64,000-word statement in which he denied his guilt. Ultimately, Tojo was convicted of his war crimes, and he accepted his conviction with dignity. Britain's Sir William Webb, chairman of the tribunal, pronounced Tojo's sentence on November 12, 1948. Hideki Tojo refused to allow an appeal of his death sentence. He was hanged on December 22, 1948, 7 years after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Hideki Tojo, Biographical Notes. Hideki Tojo graduated from the Imperial Military Academy in 1905, the year that Japan destroyed the Russian Pacific Navy and established herself as a military power. Tojo married in 1909 and entered the Army War College 3 years later, 1912. He rose through the military ranks, eventually serving from 1919 to 1922 as military attaché in Japan's embassy in Berlin following World War I. In 1924, Tojo served in the War Ministry until his appointment as commander of the 1st Infantry Regiment in Tokyo in 1929. In the 1930s, Hideki Tojo fought in the Second Sino-Japanese War, a major invasion of China by Japan. Tojo was promoted to Major General of the Japanese Army in 1933 and, in autumn of 1935, was transferred to the Japanese-controlled Manchuria in northern China to serve as Chief of the Manchurian Secret Police. 2 years later, he was appointed as Chief of Staff of the Kwantung Army, the Japanese forces in China, serving from 1937 to 1938. In May of 1938, Tojo was recalled to Tokyo and appointed Vice Minister of War. However, after 6 months, he returned to the armed services and took command of the Army's aviation. During this time, as a supporter of Nazi Germany and fearing the expansion of communism, Hideki Tojo began advocating preemptive airstrikes on both China and the Soviet Union. As War Minister from 1940 to 1944, Hideki Tojo was instrumental in leading Japan into the Axis alliance with Nazi Germany and Italy. On October 18, 1941, Tojo was appointed the 40th Prime Minister of Japan by Emperor Hirohito, commanding the entire Japanese military and serving until July 22, 1944, when he was relieved of his command. Tried by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East for war crimes, Tojo was found guilty, sentenced to death on November 12, 1948, and executed by hanging. Because of the crimes committed under his authority, Tojo is considered responsible for the murder of almost 4 million Chinese.